Hey people, today in our video here, we're going to look at how you update the runtime component. What I have here is a version 12 version of Sage X3, and we're going to be updating the runtime component that came with, I believe this is patch 22 or 23. First thing we want to do is we want to take a look and see what version we're currently on. Not that it makes a big difference, because you can always reinstall an existing version, but all I'm doing is going to the control panel, programs and features, and then just looking up the runtime component. Now granted, all of my components are all on the same machine, but you could have yours all separated or segregated on different machines. So just make sure that you're on the right machine if you don't see it. But we're just going to check the version and see what it is. Another thing to note is the ADX admin. Depending on how far of a jump you're going to be doing from one runtime component to the next, you may also have to update the ADX admin component and the management console, or the safe console is what it used to be called. It just depends on how big of a jump you're doing. I'm just going from one version to the next, like the immediate after it, so it's not going I don't have to do that kind of updating. But if you were coming from like a 91 to a 93, you might have to update the ADX admin and the safe console before doing the runtime. So just keep that in mind. But just for the sake of the video and for what I'm demonstrating, we're just going to be looking at updating it. So I just want to check and see. So I'm actually going to be updating it to 93.1.19, which I have here already downloaded and extracted. When you download them from the knowledge base, they come in an executable file, and you just have to run it and then extract it and then remember where you put it. So next thing we want to do before we do any of that kind of stuff is we just want to go log in and make sure that we don't have any users in the system, because if you do, you won't be able to update the runtime component. The runtime component primarily is like the mediator between the application and the database and the Syracuse and stuff like that. So all the classic functions, like what a classic function is referring to, like sales order, purchase order, any of the data entry screens, they're tied to what we call a classic or convergence session, and that's managed by the runtime. So we just want to make sure that none of those are open or running, and there's a really easy way to check as soon as my system loads. Let me check the language here real quick. Yep, the wrong one. So I'm just going to change that to English, US, so I can actually read it. Here we go. Okay, so we're going to want to head over to the administration module. And down towards the bottom, you'll have session management. We're just going to look at the classic client sessions, also called the convergence, and we're just going to make sure we don't have any available, because if you do, you're going to have to either ask that user to get off, or you're going to have to terminate that session so that you can update the runtime. Because if that's still lingering out here, it's not going to let you update it. So it looks like we're good. So I'm going to go back to my component list here. I'm going to go down and find the jar file. And we're just going to double click it and start it. Yes. So before you run it, you'll want to make sure you're logged in as an admin or a user with administrative rights. Mainly because the runtime requires an assigned user. And what I mean by that is that if we come up here to the services and we look at the services, and I'll show you what I'm talking about here. You don't have to actually be the user that's tied to it. You just have to know their username and password. Oh, come on again. So typically there's like a generic user that is created just for running it, but you can see it's tied to a specific user here. So we want to make sure that you have that account available before you actually can finish the install, just in case you have to come in here and plug it in. So if you know it says actually run, it shouldn't change when I do the update, but just in case, it's good to just make a note of it, just so you know what it is, because you may have to come in here and put it back. And we'll leave that open to double check when we're done. So we'll just go through the normal installation procedure. It's going to be a bunch of nexts. It's going to ask you some questions. You're going to hit next a bunch of times. We're going to accept the policy. If you want to read it, go for it. Important part here is we're modifying. We're not doing a new install. We're modifying an existing one. Even though technically it is a brand new install, because really updating them, you're actually just installing over the top of the previous one with a newer version of the same thing. And we're going to hit next, and you can have the documentation if you want it. And we'll do next again. And we just gotta let it run. It should go pretty quick. Yep, there we go. And we'll hit next, and then here's the actual install part. So if you saw my blog post that I wrote on, you'll get this little message when it gets to the Visual Studio C++ 2010. Two reasons you get this. One, it can't install it because I'm not an admin, or two, you already have it installed and it doesn't realize that you already have it installed, and it tries to install a brand new one over the existing one that's already there, and it can't, so you get this error. So if you see this and you know for a fact that Visual Studio C++ is installed, then just hit yes. If it's not, hit yes anyways, because if you hit no, it's going to roll everything back and you're going to lose your runtime. If it's not installed, you'll want to go install it and then rerun this again over the top of what you just did. So I'm going to hit next and done, and now it's done. So now we're just going to go double check and runtime. So let me refresh this. So if I come down back to here, runtime, so now it's updated. So now it shows 93.1.19. There is one extra step. We have to go tell the save console that we've updated the runtime. Alright, so we're going to launch the save console. When you get here, we're going to select solution, and then we're going to pick process servers, and you're going to want to sign in. So if everything went well, the save console should already identify that the process server or runtime needs to be updated or has an update to it, and you can tell because it highlights it this orangey yellow color. So go ahead and just click on it. And yeah, see, so it's saying that it recognizes an update, which is the version. So to confirm that, you have to select it, wait for this bottom panel to load, and then just click configure. And it should ask us if we want to configure. So pretty much what we're doing is we're reconfiguring in the save console so the save console knows that we've updated the runtime. It's a common step that's missed. People forget it all the time because they just update the component and go on with their day. Because you know, if you update ADXadmin, you don't have to come in here and tell it ADXadmin is updated. It just knows because it's reading from a specific XML file that gets updated when you update ADXadmin. Where here we actually have to tell the save console that it has an update, and we have updated it. And then by reconfiguring it, we're confirming the update. So if everything goes correctly, yep, there it goes. So now it's showing an updated date. And we're getting our technical version here now, which is good. So the only last thing to do is to sign in and make sure we can get back in. And we are in. So because it's runtime, we always want to do something that is data entry related. So I'm just going to go load quotes just to make sure I can get into it. This is the way to double check that the runtime is working. Because just because it says it's there, it says it's updated, it says it's working, we always want to double check. So you want to do something that requires runtime interaction, and doing any of the data entry screens will have you do that. I mean, you could pick anything. It could have been setup user, or it could have been purchasing, or it could have been, you know, work orders, or whatever you want. Just something that requires data entry, just to double check and make sure. So, and then just load any of the entry selections. So I can already tell that it's already working because I'm getting the entry selections. So that means that it's working, but I want to make sure that I can see some data from SQL Server. So I want it to load my stuff. Primarily what we're waiting on is the left list. So usually the very first interaction once you've updated it is a little bit slow, only for the fact that we literally just updated it. But yeah, see, now I'm getting data from SQL, so that means I know that it's making the proper connection. So now it is done. We can also double check within the software too, if you want to. Let me close out of here. You can also check the ADX admin version by going to administration and coming down here to utilities, updates, and about. And if you click on the X3 folder, give it a second to load, it'll tell us the runtime version as well. Runtime right there, 93.119, and that should match here. You can also see it in yet another place. We have it listed everywhere. If you go to X3 Solutions, in here, you'll have runtime here. The key thing here, though, is that if you have more than one runtime, you have to make sure that you eventually update all of them. You always start with the main one, you update the main runtime, which I only have one, so there's only one to update. But if you had more than one, you would want to go through and systematically update all of the runtimes so that they're all in the same version. It's not that they won't work, it's more consistent if they all are on the same version. When they get too far behind or too far ahead of each other, you start having inconsistencies, and you'll have econ resets and user drops. So it's highly recommended that we keep them all in the same version. And that is it. If you want to learn more about the runtime, you can always check out the online help. Anytime you're in the software, I'll get back in there. There's an online help that you can get to. You can always look up the components. You can also look up technical documentations. You can also look up details, patch information, all that kind of fun stuff. You can find it right here. This is a little question mark. There's an online help center. The online help center, if you want to bookmark this, is also external facing, so you can access it externally too. So you can check out any of the documentation here. You can look for runtime. You can search for, sometimes they call, if you're on an older version, they'll call it a process server. So here's how to check runtime. So older versions, like if you're on U9 or U8 or V7, you're going to want to look for process server. I don't know if it'll show up because I'm on V12. But yeah, additional process servers. So if you wanted to learn how to add additional process server in the requirements. So there you have it.